Alright guys, last time we talked about Ruan Mei, and yeah, she's kinda broken. But it's time we move on to our next character on the line, who is not so broken. Of course, a character not being broken doesn't mean they're bad. I'm of course talking about Dr.Ratio, the one character that kinda became a meme because of his name and pose, but now we are getting him for free. Yeah, you heard it. Hoyo giving a character for free? Who would have thought? But here we are. In this video, we're gonna be looking at his overall kit, his Eidolons, talk about some builds and team comps. For this specific video, I'll be focusing more on his Eidolons and discuss if they are worth it. As always, these are just my personal thoughts on the character. If you disagree or find some mistakes, feel free to correct me in the comments. With that out of the way, I'm Sho, and this is my pre-release analysis on Dr.Ratio. So, Dr.Ratio is a 5-star imaginary character following the path of Hunt. He has decently high damage and focuses on follow-up attack. In single target situations and proper teams, Ratio can dish out similar or sometimes more damage than Zilla. But also, Zilla does have some AoE through her extra turns, which Ratio does not have. His base stats are pretty decent: high attack, low HP and defense, typical Hunt stats. He's got 103 speed, which is pretty low for a Hunt character, but he does have a lot of follow-up attacks to make up for it. He also has 140 energy cost, which is kinda concerning for an extremely single target damage dealer. Looking at his traces, his basic attack deals minor imaginary damage to a single target. His skill is also kinda similar to his basic attack, deals a bit more imaginary damage to a single enemy, but it does get a lot better with his talent. When Dr.Ratio uses his skill, he has a 40% fixed chance to launch a follow-up attack against the target. It has decent multiplier, but whenever the target enemy has a debuff, the base chance of launching the follow-up attack increases by 20%. So if the enemy has 2 debuffs, the base chance becomes 100%, which is really good. Also, if the target dies before the follow-up attack hits, then the attack will be redirected towards a random target. Next, his ultimate. He deals massive imaginary damage to a single enemy and applies Wise Man's Folly to that enemy. This is a special kind of debuff that triggers a follow-up attack from Dr.Ratio when any of his ally attacks that enemy target. A maximum of 2 follow-up attacks can be triggered this way. Lastly, his technique. Dr.Ratio creates like a statue that taunts the enemy, lasting for 10 seconds, and entering battle will decrease the speed of all enemies by 15% for 2 turns. Overall, his kit has a lot of follow-up attacks built into it, but also is not that much of a complex skill set. He definitely seems pretty outdated when compared to the newer characters like Argenti, which is also pretty concerning for players. Since he's free, players are worried that he might be a shitty character, as we all kinda know that in any gacha game, free stuffs are usually useless. Anyway, moving on to his talent priority. I would say level up his talent first, as it has the follow-up attack multiplier, and his kit mainly revolves around follow-up attacks. Then his skill and his ultimate kinda has a similar priority, since they are secondary in terms of overall damage output. Lastly, his basic attack can be left at level 1, as you won't be using it anyways. Next, let's talk about his passives. Ratio's first Ascension passive gives him 2.5% crit rate and 5% crit damage for every debuff present on the target when he uses his skill. This can stack up to 6 times, so at max stacks, you can get up to 15% crit rate and 30% crit damage. His second Ascension passives has a 100% base chance to reduce the enemy target's effect res by 10% for 2 turns when Ratio uses his skill. With this and the first passive, we can see how important his skill is. Lastly, his third Ascension passive. When dealing damage to a target that has 3 or more debuffs, for each debuff the target has, the damage dealt to this target is increased by 10%, up to a maximum of 50%, which is nice, but reaching max 50% is going to be pretty tough outside something like a simulated universe. But you can also use suppose like Silver Wolf to achieve that. His stat bonuses are also pretty decent. After maxing out his traces, she gets 28% attack, 12.5% defense, and 12% crit rate, which are okay. They're not like some other characters who get like attack, crit, speed and fucking everything, which is really stupid, but yeah. Anyways, that's the kit. It's definitely nothing special, but also not something that's literally garbage. Now for the main part. I'm gonna skim through his kit because 1, his kit is pretty straightforward, but 2, I want to discuss the value of his Eidolons and if you should go for the initial ones like his E1 or E2. But first, let's see what they offer. Ratio's E1 increases the maximum stack from his first Ascension passive by 4. Initially the cap was 6 stacks, which entailed to 15% crit rate and 30% crit damage, but now at max 10 stacks, Ratio will gain 25% crit rate and 50% crit damage. And also Ratio will start with 4 stacks, so he will always start with 10% crit rate and 20% crit damage. It's a nice stat increase. Ratio's E2 makes it so that when his talent's follow-up attack hits the target, for each debuff present in the enemy, he will deal additional imaginary damage to that target, and this can be triggered a maximum of 4 times. This might not seem much, but it increases his damage output by a lot, since majority of his damage comes from his talent's follow-up attack, and this Eidolon just boosted the damage of that very talent. Next, his E3 and E5 just increases the level of his traces. Ratio's E4 is one of my favorite. When his talent is triggered, which is his follow-up attack, Ratio additionally regenerates 15 energy, which is huge. Since he had such a high energy cost at 140, getting that extra 15 energy makes a huge difference in his overall rotation. Lastly, his E6 increases the trigger count of Wise Man Folly, which is his ultimate, by 1, and increases the damage of his follow-up attack by 50%. This is the maximum damage increase he gets from his Eidolons. So overall, Ratio's Eidolons are really good, but are they worth it? I think every single one of his Eidolons substantially increases his damage, and are pretty consistent with it, except for his E2 and E6, which actually increases his damage by a lot. So I hope you did get a general idea of Dr. Ratio's Eidolons. After all that, let's see how we can build him. Starting off with his relics is pretty simple. The best in general is going to be the Wastelander set. Yeah, I know, his kit revolves around follow-up attacks, so the follow-up attack set should be his best in slot, but for a general overall aspect, the Wastelander set is still about 4 to 5% better than the follow-up attack set, which is not that much of a difference, so you can choose either one. But for all you min-maxers out there, if you want that 4 to 5% extra damage, then go for the Wastelander set. Other than those two, the third best is going to be a 2-piece combo of the Wastelander set and the follow-up attack set, which is also right below the other sets. In fact, all these 3 set combos are so close to each other that at the end it boils down to substats. So just choose whichever you have better pieces of. And yeah, just for the sake of mentioning, you can also use the Musketeer set, because literally every DPS can use that set, and also the Quantum set, because yeah. In terms of ornaments, the best is of course the Inner Salsado. Both the follow-up attack and ultimate damage increase are really good for Ratio. The second best is going to be the new attack set, the Firmament Frontline Glamour set. It's a great attack and damage stat stick, and even though getting the full 18% damage might seem pretty high, but you can easily fix that by using speed buffers like Asta or Hanya. In addition to speed, they both have debuffs in their kit, so they can help increase Ratio's damage. Lastly, a less great attack stat stick, the Space Sealing Station set, will also be great on him if you don't have other options. In terms of main set on the pieces, he wants standard DPS stats. You wanna go crit on the body, speed on the boots, imaginary damage on the sphere, and attack on the rope. For substats, just focus on getting crit, attack, and speed. Now I didn't add a rotation segment for Ratio, because usually for DPS characters, there are not that many different ways by which you can tweak their build, and because of which rotation becomes pretty simple. For Ratio, he will have a 4 to 5 turn ultimate rotation with only using his skills. You can use an ERR rope to make it a guaranteed 4 turn ultimate, but you lose out on a lot of damage, so it's not recommended. Next is Lightcones. Now similar to other follow-up attack characters like Topaz, his Lightcone choices are also pretty specific. Not so much so that other Lightcones are unusable, but there are significant difference in damage between them. The two best options are going to be his signature, Baptism of Pure Thought, and Topaz's Lightcone, Worrisome Blissful. His signature gives up to 44% crit damage based on the number of debuffs on the enemy, increases his follow-up attack damage, and also enables their follow-up attack to ignore 24% of the target's defense. This Lightcone is the single best investment to increase his damage. And of course, for the question of if you should go for his E1 or his Lightcone, I would suggest going for his Lightcone. The other close option is going to be the Worrisome Blissful. This is a great stat stick for follow-up attack users like Ratio. It gives both crit rate and crit damage, and also a lot of follow-up attack damage. It's a great option for Ratio, and if you have this, then I wouldn't recommend going for his signature. The Hurrastor Lightcone, Cruising of the Celestia, is always a great stat stick for any hunt character. It gives a lot of crit rate and damage, and is free. Other 5-star options like Zealous Lightcone and Yunchin's Lightcone are okay options for Ratio, as they buff basic attack and skill, but Ratio mainly focuses on follow-up attack damage, so they are worse than even 4 stars. Speaking of which, for 4 stars, there are only 2 options that I would recommend, and they are only Silence Remain, which at higher superimposition level makes for a great star stick, and River Flows, which is a decent F2P option if you don't have anything else. The chart here can give you a simple explanation of where each Lightcone stands, and you can clearly see the sheer difference between the first 2 Lightcones and the rest. We really need more 4-star Lightcones for follow-up attack characters. Finally, let's discuss some potential synergies for Dr. Ratio. Now first, whenever we see follow-up attack in someone's kit, the first character that comes to mind is Topaz. And for Ratio as well, Topaz is going to be a core character for any of his team. She increases follow-up attack damage, and also with Ratio doing so many follow-up attacks and with Topaz's passive which gives more action advances to Numbi, Topaz and Numbi will take so many turns that you won't even be able to count. Both Topaz and Dr. Ratio complements each other so much so that any team without any one of them will feel significantly lacking in damage. Apart from Topaz, characters that can apply a lot of debuffs will also be a great pair for Ratio, and the best characters to do so are Silverwolf, Gwen, and to some extent both Pella and Welt. First, Silverwolf is going to be the best for this spot, as she has 5 debuffs in her kit, which is the max Ratio needs. Well, technically he needs 6 to literally maximize everything in his kit, but he gets 1 from his ultimate, so 6 in total. And not just for Ratio himself, Silverwolf is literally the best single target debuffer in the game, so having her in the team will be great. Next is Gwen. Now she doesn't has quite a lot of debuffs as Silverwolf, but she does have Burn and Fire Kiss, and through Fire Kiss, she can increase Ratio's damage further. Not to mention that she can add her own damage to the team. The last 2 characters are like pseudo choices for Ratio, because to take full advantage from them, you need a specific light cone called Resolution Shine's Pearls. Both Pella and Welt need this light cone to add enough debuffs to their kit. And I forget to mention this, but you can also use Resolution Shine on Gwen as well to add another debuff to her kit. Lastly, Ratio's preferred buffers. Now for Harmony characters, Tingyun and the upcoming Ruan Mei are going to be his best friends. Bronya is not that recommended because she won't be able to buff Ratio's follow-up attack, but Tingyun can do that, and so is Ruan Mei. Tingyun can provide a lot of energy which will help getting Ratio's ultimate faster, resulting in more follow-up attacks, which then produces more overall damage. Ruan Mei on the other hand will be a great general Harmony character for any team. The damage buffs and rest penetration she provides are going to be the best buffs one can provide to their team. Also, she buffs her whole team, not just one character. Lastly, characters like Hanya, Asta and Yukong are also great choices to use with Ratio, but the other options that I just mentioned are just better. And if you are using Topaz with him, which you should if you have her, then there is just 1 slot remaining, because you also need a sustain, and it's best to fill that slot with a character like Silverwolf or Gwen or even Tingyun, who are more universal and provide a lot more utility to the team. So overall, I say he's a good character. He's not overpowered, just good. In terms of damage output, he is similar or a bit better in single target situations and will probably great for boss fights. His overall damage output is not going to be as crazy as someone like Imbibed Lune or Jingliu, but is good enough for a 5-star. He has definitely more damage than any of the standard 5-star DPSs, but not as much damage as some of the new limited characters. He's kinda in the middle, which is great for a free character, and also an awesome thing for newer players who does not have a good DPS in their account, and now they get one for free. So a big win here. His constellations are pretty good as well. Every single one increases damage by quite a bit, but they are not so crazy that you should feel pressure to pull for them. And if you do want to invest in him, then I say going for his signature light cone will be a better choice. In terms of builds, Ratio is pretty easy to build, with Relics says that you have already farmed previously, and he does have decent many options for light cones as well. He also has various team options. So after discussing all this, I say Dr. Ratio is definitely worth building for any account, regardless if you're new or a veteran. And there you have it. Those were my overall thoughts on our upcoming free character, Dr. Ratio. Please don't think that him being free means he's a bad character. His kit and damage are worthy of a 5-star. So thank you very much for watching. If you found this video helpful, drop a like and subscribe for more Star Rail and Genshin content from yours truly. And as always, please share your own thoughts on him and which character or team do you plan to play with him. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in my next video.